Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Welcome to another lecture, and in today's class we are going to do the 5th chapter of our book, the name of which is Toasted English. Now this chapter is written by R.K. Narayan, and we all know that he is a renowned author. There are wonderful stories that are written by him. Malgudi days are the most famous tales that he's written about, and they are quite popular everywhere. They are fun to read. Now this story, this chapter that we are going to read is basically a research paper that was written by R.K. Narayan. Now Toasted English, what does it talk about? It is about the use of English in different countries. Now this tells us that even the Americans were tired of the Britishers. So what did they do? They made everything else related to British redundant. They stopped using British things, British goods. The only thing that they were using was the language, that is English. So they were only making use of the English language. But that also, they tried to simplify it to a great extent. And how did they try to simplify it? By removing the usage of passive voice. So they stopped using the passive voice. They tried to make the things as simple as they could. And this process of changing a language is known as toasting. So this chapter's name, which is Toasted English, what is it derived from? This is derived from the fact that the Americans decided to change, to modify the usage of this language to ensure that it is simple for the people to use. And in this chapter, R.K. Narayan has also asserted the fact, he has also laid stress on the fact that our language, that is Indian English, should also have a stamp known as a Swadeshi stamp. He wants Indian English to have its own identity. Okay, so this is just a research paper in which he's talked about the usage of English in the different countries. So let us start reading. Okay. In American restaurants, they call for toasted English, referring to English muffins, which, though being made in America, now retain English as a sort of concession to their origin. The same may be said of American language too. They went through a phase of throwing out the British but retaining the language and letting it flourish on the American soil. The restaurant English is somewhat different from its British counterpart. It may have said to gone through a process of toasting. So R.K. Narayan says that in American restaurants, they call for toasted English. So they use the word toasted English, referring to the English muffins. We all know what muffins are. Okay, the cakes, the small cupcakes. So in the American restaurants, they use the word toasted English for the English muffins, which, though being made in America, so although these muffins are made in America, now retain English as a sort of concession to their origin. So the reason why the word English is written before muffins. Now the writer is just trying to tell us that these muffins are obviously made in America only, but we add the word English before it as a sort of concession to the origin, in order to tell the people about the place it originated from, about the place it started from. The same may be said of American language too. So this is something that can be said about the American language, the language which is used in America as well. They went through a phase of throwing out the British. So there was a phase, there was a time when the Americans threw the Britishers out of their country, they threw the Britishers out of their place, retaining the language. Retaining means, but they kept the language of the British with themselves and letting it flourish on the American soil. Flourish, grow. So they allowed the language to remain with them and they allowed it to grow also on the American soil. So they did not just forget the language, they actually made the language grow on their soil. The restaurant English is somewhat different from its British counterpart. British counterpart means what language is being used by the Britishers is totally different from what is being used by the Americans. And this is what is known as the process of toasting. So this is what the modification of the language is called. The language is same. English is the language that we are talking about. But it is modified. It is used differently in British and it is used differently in America. Why? Because the Americans have changed their language according to themselves. They have made it simpler. One noticeable result of this toasting is that much of the formalism surrounding the use of English has been abandoned. R.K. Narayan says that one change that is very noticeable, one change that we can clearly notice in the language English which is used by the Americans is that much of the formalism surrounding the use of it has been abandoned. Abandoned, it has been removed, stopped using. So the people have stopped using the formal, formal type of the language. They've made it very simple. There is no formalism which is there in the language at all. In America, they have freed the language from the stifling tyranny of the passive voice, where we would ceremoniously say, trespassing prohibited. Their signboards, as I noticed in the parks of Berkeley, merely say, never newly planted, don't walk, or absolutely no parking, which leaves no room for speculation and motorists need not spend too much time peering out and studying the notice. So, he's now giving us the examples how this toasting of the language, simplification of the language has taken place. He says that in America, they have freed the language from the stifling tyranny of the passive voice. Stifling, something that stifles you, something that leaves you suffocated. Tyranny means dominance, authority. So what used to happen first in America, what have the people done? People have made the English language free. How? By taking away the usage of passive voice from it. When we use passive voice in the English language, the language becomes a little complicated. How? Because the rules behind the same are to be kept in mind. So because of that, it adds a little bit of complication to it, right? So the writer tells us that this tyranny, this dominance, this control that passive voice has over the language English has been taken away from it, and in America, English has become very free, very liberal. For example, where we would say ceremoniously by adding a lot of flowers, making something look very beautiful. So, where one used to say trespassing prohibited. Trespassing means to enter somewhere without taking somebody's permission. That is known as trespassing. Prohibited means not allowed. So, where one could have said that this, trespassing to this place is not allowed. So, rather than using such difficult words, what do the signboards say? He says that I noticed in the park of Berkeley, which simply read, newly planted, don't walk. That these plants inside the park are newly planted, so don't walk on them. Or absolutely no parking. So the simplest version of language, which leaves no room for speculation. Speculation, any doubts. So there is no possibility of being doubtful about anything at all, and motorists need not spend too much time peering out and studying the notice. Peering, looking. So he says that rather than using very beautiful, flowery language, in America, very simple language is used. Simple instructions are written on the board which make it easier for the people who are driving a vehicle to understand them. They do not have to waste a lot of time in understanding and interpreting what is written. A very clear message is conveyed through the simplest language. In a similar situation, our authorities are likely to plant a 20-line inscription on the landscape to say, under Municipal Act, so and so, this area has been reserved, etc., etc., and any vehicle stationed thereon will be deemed to have contravened subsection so and so of the Motor Vehicle Act, etc., etc. I saw on many American office doors, just do not enter. The traffic signs at pedestrian crossings never mince words. They just say go or wait. In a Hollywood studio, I was rather startled to read, Mark Stevens, keep out. Mark Stevens is a busy television personality who does not like to be disturbed by visitors. Incidentally, it left me wondering why, if Mr. Stephens did not like interruptions, he announced his name at all on the door. But it is one of the minor mysteries that make travel through the country so engrossing. So he's given us another example. He says that in a similar situation, our authorities, something, if in our country, some new plant, some new landscape, some new building, would have been constructed, then what our authorities would have written under it is a 20-liner inscription. Inscription, something which is written on the board, something which is inscribed on the stone. So, in order to tell the people about something new that has been constructed, our authorities would have written a 20-liner, description of it. They would have written that under the Municipal Act and so on and so on, this area has been reserved. So, this area is under the government, etc., etc. Any vehicle stationed, any vehicle which is found in this area will be deemed to have contravened. Will be deemed means that vehicle is going to be, kept with the government only because that vehicle will have contravened. Contravened means would have broken some law and of the Motor Vehicle Act, etc., etc. So, what he means to say is that a huge description is usually written by our authorities, wherein they mention that so and so act will be broken and the person will be, punished, the vehicle will be mortgaged by you or taken away by you. So, all these things are written as the description. On the other hand, in the American offices, what do you see on the door? Simply, do not enter. Just 3 lines. Now compare. Writing 20 lines explaining the section and the subsection of the act, the law that you are breaking, and then writing just 3 simple words, do not enter. What out of 2 is going to leave a major impact? The traffic signs at the pedestrian crossing never mince words. So, whatever traffic signs are also there on the pedestrian crossing. We all know who are the pedestrians, the people who walk on foot. They are the pedestrians. So, on the pedestrian walking, on the pedestrian crossings also, what instructions are written are very simple. They never mince words, they never mix the words, they never use any confusing words. Simply, if you have to go, they ask you to go. If they ask you to wait, then you have to wait. So, there is nothing else. In a Hollywood studio, I was rather startled to read Mark Stevens Keep Out. So, he's, discussed with us another example which left him very surprised. He says that I was startled. I was shocked when out of one, on the door of one Hollywood studio, it was written, Mark Stevens Keep Out. So, they had written that Mark Stevens is inside the studio, so you keep out. Mark Stevens is a busy television personality and he does not like to be disturbed by anyone. Incidentally, it left me wondering. Now, when the author read this, he was wondering, he was thinking that if Mr. Stephens did not like any interruptions, if he did not like anyone to disturb him, then why did he, disclose his name on the door at all? If he would not have told the people by writing it outside the door that it was Mark Stevens inside, then nobody would have got to know it. He first informed the people about his presence and then he gave them an instruction not to enter. So, the author was wondering why did he do it in the first place. But then he says that these are some of the minor mysteries, very small mysteries that make travel through the country so engrossing. So, he says that this country, America, whenever I travel through this country, I feel very engrossed. I am very occupied because of the new and beautiful and mysterious things that I see around me. And this, Mark Stevens Keep Out, was a very small mystery that I cannot answer, that I cannot get an answer to. The toasting of English has been achieved through other means also. Americans have evolved certain basic keywords which may be used anywhere, anyhow, words which have universal multi-purpose use. I may make my point clear if I mention the usage of the word check, which may be safely labelled as the American national expression. While the British usage confines to the bare dictionary definition, the American uses it anywhere. This expression is so devised that one may blindly utter it and still find that it is appropriate for the occasion. He gives us another example. He says that the toasting of English, the modification of this language English, has been achieved through other means also. So, there have been other means, there have been other ways through which the modification of language has been achieved. Americans have evolved, so Americans have changed, have grown certain basic keywords which may be used anywhere, anyhow, and they have a universal multi-purpose use, So, Americans have come out with a few words that can be used anywhere by anyone in any which way they want to. He says that I may make my point clear if I mention the usage of the word check. So he's saying that in order to explain this better, that the Americans have come out with a few words that can be used universally, that can be used anywhere for any purpose, I'll give you a small example, and the example is the word check, which may be safely labeled as the American national expression. He says that we can label this word check as a national American expression. You know, it is used in America by almost anyone and everyone. While the British usage confines to the bare dictionary meaning. So, the Britishers use the word check only according to its dictionary definition. Bare means only. So the Britishers use the word only according to the meaning which is written in the dictionary. The American uses it anywhere. So the Americans can use this word anywhere. This expression is so devised. So this word check is so devised, it is so evolved that one may blindly utter it, that a person can just utter it, can just speak it without thinking and still find that it is appropriate for the occasion. So you can just say check for anything and you need to be sure that it is going to fit somewhere or the other, that it is not going to look abrupt, it is going to have a meaning in context to what you have spoken. He says, I'll check. In America, how do the people use the word check? So, I'll check means I will find out, or I will investigate, or I will examine, I will scrutinize, verify, probe. Scrutinize, to look at something very, very carefully. Probe, to search for something. So, I'll check means to look for something. Your check means your ticket, or your token, or whatever you may have to give to somebody else. Check room is where you have your possessions for a while. So, the room wherein you can keep your things safely for some time. You know, this is something that we do. You go out, you travel to some place and you are not able to get a room for yourself and you have to go and find one. So, you can keep your luggage in the check room and then you can just be sure about it. You can do whatever chores you have to and can return and take back your luggage from there. So, that is a check room. Check girl is one who takes care of your umbrella or anything else you may leave in custody. So, if there's something that you want safely to be kept by somebody, your umbrella or anything, so the girl who looks after it is known as a check girl. Check in and check out. At first I heard chuck out and felt disturbed. So the writer is telling us that when he first heard the word check out, he thought that somebody is asking him to chuck out to get out. And he said that I felt very disturbed when I heard this. So, check in and check out, where do we use these words? Refers to one's arrival in the hotel and departure therefrom. So, when you arrive at a hotel, you check in, and when you depart from a hotel, you check out. And there are scores of other incidental uses of the words, and there are other words also which are used in the similar manner. If you ever hard up for a noun or a verb, you may safely utter the word check and feel confident that it will fit. He says if you ever hard up means if you find any difficulty in thinking of a word to fit in that situation, you can simply utter the word check. And you can be confident that it is going to fit in, that it is going to get into the meaning. Fabulous is another word that is used freely without much premeditation. Of course, everyone knows what fabulous means, but American usage has enlarged its sense. So, another example is of the word fabulous. He says that we all know fabulous is another word which they use freely without much premeditation. Premeditation without thinking. So this is another word that the Americans can speak without thinking much. Of course, everyone knows what fabulous means. So we all know the meaning of the word fabulous. But Americans' usage has enlarged its sense. Enlarged has made its usage very broad. One can use this word in a broader manner. I heard a lady in Wisconsin declare, "Oh, those cats of mine are fabulous," meaning they are eccentric. Eccentric means strange. So he says that I once heard a lady who lived in Wisconsin and she was talking about her cats, and she said that those cats of mine are fabulous. So what she meant to say was that my cats are very strange, they are very unique. And what did she use for them? She used simply the word fabulous. Oh, so and so, he's so fabulous, may mean anything from a sincere compliment to an insinuation that so and so displays a mild form of charming lunacy. So he says that if you hear the usage of the word fabulous for anything or anyone, you can assume that it can either be a compliment, something good that is being spoken about you, or it can be an insinuation, it can be an idea for you that displays a mild form of charming lunacy, madness. Or it can be an indication that somebody is referring to you as a lunatic person, is calling you mad, is calling you somewhere mad. Okay or okay is another well-known example. It is the easiest sound that ever emanated from the human vocal cords. Everyone knows how comprehensive its sense can be. Okay is a self-sufficient word which needs no suffix to indicate any special respect for the listener. It can be by itself without a sir to conclude the sentence. In this respect, it is like yea, which seals off a sentence without further ado. Yes, sir or yes, darling are conceivable, but yea, sir or yea, darling is unthinkable. Yea is uttered in a short base of a tongue grunt, which almost snaps any further continuation of a sentence. Yes involves time as a sibilant could be prolonged. So, he says that okay or okay is another example. It is the easiest sound that ever emanated that ever was spoken out of the human vocal cords. Everyone knows how comprehensive its sense can be. Comprehensive, that okay word can be used in multiple forms, in multiple respects. Okay is a self-sufficient word. So this word okay is self-sufficient. You do not need to add any suffix. You do not need to add anything after this word. You do not need to add anything before this word to indicate any special respect for the listener. So in order to show that you respect the listener, if you are talking to your boss, you need not say okay boss or okay sir. You can simply say okay to conclude the sentence. So that is going to suffice. In this respect, it is like yea. So just like this is the usage of the word yea, which seals off a sentence without further ado. Seals off a sentence means when we say yea in some sentence, there is no scope of saying anything further. The sentence will be all over. Yes, sir or yes, darling are conceivable. We usually use these words in our everyday life. But saying yea, sir or yea, darling is something which cannot be thought of. Yea is uttered in a short base of the grunt, base of the tongue grunt. So, yea is not a word, It is just a base of the tongue grunt. Base of the tongue grunt means something which is just said by At times we do make certain sounds when we have to say something. So, So this is something that is just spoken by you or just uttered by you in order to express something. So, ye is not a word, it is just something which is uttered by you, which almost snaps any further continuation of a sentence. Snaps, stops. So, once you say the word ye, there is no possibility of you to say anything further. Yes, on the other hand, involves time. It takes time to say the word yes as compared to the word ye. Why? Because the sibilant of yes is prolonged. Sibilant, the last word, the last sound. When we say yes, S is very much emphasized on, right? And when we say the word ye, so it is like no indication, no emphasis is given on anything. So the speaking the word yes takes longer time as compared to speaking the word. So my dear students, what have we learned so far from this chapter? We've learned the meaning of the word toasted. It means modifying the language according to your own views. Now the Americans have, they wanted the Britishers to leave from their country, but they continued with the usage of the language English. What they did was, they just removed the usage of passive voice from it so that it can be made easier. The writer has given us multiple examples like do not cross, newly planted, do not enter, and then he's talked about Mark Stevens, keep out, and then he tells us about the usage of the word okay and yay and yes. So these are just the examples to show how the Americans have toasted this language, have changed the language English in an easy and acceptable manner. So the refinements of usage in countries where English has a bizarre status are worth study. On a London bus, you will never hear the conductor cry, ticket, ticket. He approaches the passenger and says, thank you. And on receiving the fare says again, thank you, sir. I found out that one could calculate the number of passengers in the bus by halving the total of number of thanks heard. In any Western country, if a receptionist asks, can I help you? It really means, have you any business here? If so, state it. Or it may mean, evidently you have wandered off to a wrong place. The writer again gives us more examples. He says that the refinement of usage in countries where English has a bizarre status. Bizarre status means the usage of this language is very widespread. It is used by a lot of people. So, one needs to study the usage of this language, English, in those countries in which it is used, by everyone around. So they have actually refined its usage. They have made it better. They have improved the quality of the usage of this language. For example, he says that on a London bus, you are traveling, you will never hear the conductor cry, ticket, ticket. So the conductor is not going to ask you to take the ticket from him. He will simply approach you. He will come to the passenger and will say thank you. When he says thank you, the passengers are going to buy the ticket from him. And after giving the ticket to the passenger, the conductor will again say thank you, sir. So the writer tells us that if in a London bus you wish to calculate how many passengers are there, so what you need to do is just count the number of thank yous that the conductor has spoken, and you just need to half it. Why half it? Because the conductor is saying thank you twice to the same person. So if there are 10 people in the bus, obviously he has spoken thank you to them 20 times. So we need to half it and we'll get to know the number of passengers in the bus. He again gives us another example that if in a Western country you enter a hotel and the receptionist asks you, "Can I help you?" then what she really means to ask you is, "Have you any business here? That is there anything that you want to do here? If yes, then please tell." Or it may mean, "Evidently you have wandered off to a wrong place. That clearly you have come to a wrong place. So please leave, please get out." A man who wants to pass you always says, "Excuse me," while he may with all justice, burst out, "What do you mean by standing there, gaping at the world while you block everybody's passage?" So he says that there might be a man who wants to pass you. You're standing in the middle of a path. The man wants to pass you. He wants to go away from there, but you're blocking the path. Rather than saying that, "Why are you standing here gaping at the world?" Gaping, why are you looking at everything around you with such surprise and blocking everybody's passage? Why are you causing a hurdle in everybody's passage? What do the Americans do? They have made the language very refined, just I told you. So what do they say? Very politely, that person will simply say, "Excuse." So rather than saying the whole thing and "Why are you standing here blocking in my path?" we usually prefer to say just "Excuse." Stand aside, man. When you send your card in, the busy man's secretary appears and whispers in your ear, "Would you like to wait?" Though the tone is one of consultation, you have really no choice in the matter. The thing to do is not to answer the question but say thanks and look for a comfortable seat in the waiting. Although you may feel like saying, "No, I would not like to wait, I have other things." So he's given us another example that when you send your card in means you want to meet somebody. So you have an appointment with someone and you go to meet somebody. And that busy person with whom you have to meet, his or her secretary, will come in front of you and very slowly. Whispering means speaking something very slowly. So that person will very slowly speak in your ear. "What? Would you like to wait?" So this is what that person will ask. Though the tone is one of consultation. So this is a question that the other person is asking you. The other person is trying to consult you, is trying to, ask you about it. You really have no choice. Although it is a question, but you have no choice. You cannot say yes or no. The only thing to do, the best and the most polite thing to do in that situation is not to answer the question. Say thank you. Find a comfortable seat around you and sit down. Although what is going on in our head at that time? In our head, we feel like saying that person, "No, I would not like to wait because I have a lot of other things to do." So yes, this is what we usually like to tell the people who ask us to wait, but we do not have a choice. We can only say, the time has come for us to consider seriously the question of a Bharat brand of English. As I have said in my essay on English in India, so far English has a comparatively confined existence in France, chiefly in the halls of learning, justice or administration. Now the time is ripe for it to come to the dusty street, to the marketplace under the banyan tree. English must adopt the complexion of our life and assimilate its. I am not suggesting here a Mongolization of the language. I am not recommending that we should go back to the days when we heard, particularly in the railways, where you going, man? Bharat English will respect the rule of law and maintain the dignity of grammar, but still have a Swadeshi stamp about it unmistakably, like the Madras handloom check shirt or the Tirupati doll. How can it be achieved in a question for all practical men? So R.K. Narayan says that now is the time when we need to consider very seriously the question of a Bharat brand of English. So we need to think about the usage of English in our country and calling it the Bharat brand of English. So we need to have our own version of English now. As I have said in my essay on English in India, so he says he's talking about an essay titled English in India, in which he talked about the usage of the English language in India. So far, English has comparatively confined existence in the country, confined, limited. The usage of this language is very limited in our country. Chiefly, it is seen in the hall of learning. So when you are going for an exam, English is the medium. Justice, when you go to some court, when you go for some justice, English is the language. Whenever you have any administration work, then also you need to follow the language English. Now the time is ripe for it to come to the dusty street. Ripe for it means now is the time when we Indians are totally prepared to bring this language to the fore. Bringing it to the fore means making it possible to use it everywhere. On the dusty streets, everyone on the road should talk in English. To the marketplace, people need to use this language in the market. Under the banyan tree also, if somebody is sitting, this language should be used. English must adopt the complexion of our life and assimilate its idiom. So assimilate its idiom means the reason why the language English is so popular is because of its universal aspect. So we need to understand it, we need to respect it, and we need to make use of it. I am not suggesting here a mongrelization of the language. Mongrelization of the language, he simply says that I don't want the language to change. I don't want the language to undergo any sort of changes. I am not recommending that we should go back to the days when we heard, particularly in the railways, where you going, man? So he says that neither do I want the language to change, nor do I recommend, nor do I suggest that we should go back to those days when in our country, in order to speak in English, people used to say to each other, "Where you going, man?" which is not at all a proper sentence. Bharat English will respect the rule of law. So the English language, the Indian English, is going to respect the rule of law. Whatever is under the rule of law will be accepted. Maintain the dignity of grammar, is going to give equal respect to the usage of grammar, but still have a Swadeshi stamp about it unmistakably. But despite that, there is going to be a Swadeshi, an Indian stamp on that language, just the way the Madras handloom check shirt or the Tirupati doll. So these two things, the Madras handloom check shirt and a Tirupati doll, cannot be found anywhere but in India. Similarly, the language, the Bharat English that we are talking about, will only be used in India only. How can it be achieved is a question for all practical men to tackle. But he says, how can we achieve this aim? How can we assure the usage of Bharat English across the country is a very good question, is a big problem for all the practical men to tackle. So we need to tackle this problem. We need to understand this problem in a very practical manner, because the answer to this question is not. And with this, my dear students, we come to the end of the explanation of the chapter. So here the chapter, as we read, R.K. Narayan, the writer is talking about the toasting of the language English in the American countries. He first introduced us to the word toasting by telling us that it means modification of a language, changes that take place in a language. He then gives us the examples how the Americans have kept the English language with themselves but have made it simpler by removing the usage of passive voice from it. So he has then given us multiple examples how in front of some building in our country a 20-line inscription is written, while in the other countries it simply says out. Or do not enter, the plants are newly planted. So the Americans lay stress on the simplest usage of the language rather than using it in a ceremonious manner. Moreover, he talks about the words like okay and check and fabulously, which are used universally, and for multi-purposes, for different purposes. He then tells us that in America, the language has been refined. The people who can say something in a very rude manner have refined the language by making it polite, by making it seem very, very kind and affectionate. Like saying excuse me or yes to when somebody, thank you to when somebody says would you like to wait. In the last paragraph of this chapter, he talks about the need of making, putting a Swadeshi stamp on the English language by calling it Bharat English. This English will have proper rules of grammar. It will respect the rules, whatever laws it has to be found. But there will be a Swadeshi stamp on it. And he talks about, in the end, he simply ends it with a rhetorical question that how can we achieve this target is something difficult and we all need to think of. Okay?